Hello and welcome to the BNB show. My name is Brandon. This is Brendan over here from Seahawks Brendon Nelson channel here on YouTube. And we are coming to you guys today to look at this upcoming matchup. Brendan, how are you doing on this fine Thursday afternoon? Have you been frozen in yet over there on the west side? Or are you guys
We
making
only
through
got a
on that?
little bit, man. We only got a little bit.
It's really cold here. It's like -10 with the wind chill and all that. You go outside and you're like, okay, I'm gonna stay inside. Let's go ahead and let's just
But I
this
do
is my
that
weekend.
anyway, so
I know. Well, it fits to what I naturally want to do. So, it's not against me either on that. I love it. But boy, is
mhm.
it's a different kind of cold when it gets to -10. That's where you're like, okay, this isn't just I could deal with this. It's like run for the indoors. Get inside. Dear God. Well, we've got an interesting matchup to preview here. We got to watch I'm sure you watched a little bit of that Jets action go on here on Thursday night as they go down. Looks like we really got to hope that Mike White doesn't come back because then we get Wilson or the other guy backing up, and that gives our chances.
Yeah, I think the Jets have figured out one game too early how bad Zach Wilson is.
Boy, they have. He is just talk about regressing and then not even being good out the shoot and then getting even worse from there. He's looked all parts of that here out the gate as a pro, and he is, I don't know where he's going to get his next chance, or
Yeah,
it's going to say something.
I've never heard of this Streveler guy. I don't know who that is.
I don't either. I mean, it says they don't have. That's not like a capable third guy you're bringing in. That's like, oh, just anybody at all. Let's put them in and see if they can do better. And they are, and he is. Not doing like widely better, but he is at least.
Yes, yeah.
He's at least. Wilson was looking horrific in there. So be interesting to see if with the teams that need quarterbacks this offseason, Brendan, if there's going to be a team that tries to talk themselves into throwing them a 5th-round pick or something for Wilson to try to bring him in, because it doesn't seem like he's got much of a future there with New York. They're already booing him in the
Oh yeah.
stands. Well, we're not here to talk about this New York matchup quite yet, though. That is still a week out. Brendan, our Seahawks go out onto the road this week and into old haunts as we have this year, going through the AFC West at times. And this week we're going to Arrowhead, out into Kansas City, to take on a tough Chiefs team. There's times I think you can look at teams like this Chiefs team and go, okay, well, they're just paper tigers. They've been able to just be kind of front runners. They just kind of getting on the better end of a schedule. But that doesn't look the case as I was kind of setting up to look at this matchup and how it played out. What do you see from this Kansas City Chiefs team this year versus what they've been in prior years as we approach this matchup?
They look relatively similar to me in most ways. Obviously, they lose Tyreek Hill, but I'll tell you, without Tyreek Hill, they've still found ways to produce at a phenomenally high level. They've obviously added a Juju Smith-Schuster who's been all right for them. They've they've rebuilt their offense a little bit around maybe Kelsey as their number one target instead of Tyreek Hill. And as expected from any team that has Andy Reid as their coach, they haven't missed much of a beat. They are also enjoying the spoils of their rebuilt offensive line from last year, where they decided to completely turn over their entire offensive line, I believe. So this year, with that transitionary period now over, I think they're benefiting tremendously from that. I guess the one thing with this Chiefs team that is maybe a little disappointing would be Clyde Edwards-Helaire has not really panned out the way they might have hoped. They spent a first-round pick on him. They obviously had a high expectations for him. And at this point, he almost feels like an afterthought in this offense. Like there are a couple different running backs on this team that are more important or just as important as he is. But overall, the machine is still working. And it goes to show you that good offensive teams in the NFL are quite often a machine. You take one part out, you just need to sub another part in. And as long as the part is generally the same, similar, the machine is still going to hum. So on that side, you have pretty much what you expect. On the other side of the ball, it's what you would expect from a team that is spending all this money on Mahomes and Kelsey, and to a certain extent their new offensive line. They have some nice pieces, as always. I think Chris Jones is maybe having the best year of his career, actually. He might be playing the best football of his life. But it is a defense that you would expect to be able to make some hay against if only we had our offensive playmakers this week. And unfortunately, we're going to be missing probably at least some of them, maybe a lot of them. So I wish I could say we can take full advantage of some of their defensive weaknesses, but I just don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. And I think in tandem with what you said about it being being well honed machine, it certainly is that it's, I think, helped them that they've been able to really make smart moves in addition to that, at least on that offensive side of the ball. The going down and understanding they need to make sure that offensive line was going to be protecting Mahomes for the next decade, and that they need to invest into it, that they need to go kind of whole hog with it, even if it was going to cause them to have to suffer a little bit of pain last year. And even in their sort of year of having to take those lumps and those pains for those rookies and for the new guys to kind of get implemented in, they still had a pretty good year last year on top of it. So it's not like they're coming off any sort of bad season on the prior in that respect of things. And you look at, it seems almost like they took Smith-Schuster and Valdez Scandling with his big playability, and Smith-Schuster's with his sort of yak and get underneath kind of stuff and what he does. And you take the combination of them, and they sort of give you the equivalent of Tyreek Hill to that offense. And it's allowed them to not have to miss a beat. That's what it kind of looks like to me at times with what they're doing. And the kid, that rookie, Isaiah, was a Pachenko.
Yeah.
He's really playing well for them, and that he's overtaken that Clyde Edwards-Helaire pick. And I've been shocked. I always thought Helaire was kind of a little overdrafted, where the Chiefs were kind of needing a running back. So they're sort of reaching for one when they grabbed him there. But he certainly hasn't quite jumped up to snuff. I mean, there's a difference in yard per carry even between those two guys this year when they're on the field, is for one production versus the other.
Yeah, I didn't know too much about Edwards-Helaire when he got drafted, but I did kind of feel like if you're a team like the Chiefs, the last thing you need to be doing is spending a first-round pick on a running back. You just don't need to.
Yeah, and you look at that offense he was coming out of. You got a guy that wasn't exactly a physical marvel, and you have how many offensive linemen went to the NFL off that LSU championship team? Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson. He had Randy Moss's son at tight end on that team. It was a stacked team there. It wasn't like defenses could just tee off on the running game. In many ways, when they were running the ball, it was kind of like, all right, they were so jumped up to try to stop the pass that they're probably allowing stuff a little bit more underneath with it. So he was okay, but he's a little undersized for that pick. If you're gonna get a guy like that, you want him to be really fast, and he wasn't necessarily really fast. He was just the short area burst guy that could kind of juke guys in the open field and get free. But that they found, at least it still finds a way to come up golden, Brendon. That's what good organizations do, is even if they're handed a kind of a hand that doesn't work, they find a way to kind of alternate off of it. I did like their approach too, of realizing with Tyreek the price was going to be too high, / they didn't really want to pay a guy going into his 30s that amount of money, which this year, look, Miami's getting the benefits of that. I don't know if he's going to continue to play at the same place, 31, 32, 33, but they took those picks and reinvested back across the board, didn't they? Because they had 2 first-round picks in this last draft, 2 second-round picks in this last draft, and they really found a way to kind of add everything back along the path, especially looking at the defensive side of the ball, because they got a UW guy out there who's playing pretty good ball in his rookie year right now.
Right. Yeah, I was actually looking at some of their new defensive pieces. It seems like George Karlaftis is playing. It's not been a great rookie year for him so far. He's been struggling along a little bit, but Trent McDuffie, like you said, that's the UW guy that you're referencing. He seems like he's come along very quickly as one of the better cornerbacks in the league. And I think it's a great example of how you intelligently build a team. You accept that you're going to have some weaknesses on the defensive side of the ball, but you've got this generational formula on the offensive side around Mahomes. So you just accept that, and you accept that there are going to be games that get away from you because your defense is substandard. Like Frank Clark is genuinely one of their best players on defense, and he hasn't really done much of anything since the Super Bowl they won, I don't think. Like he's been very mediocre.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think he's having his best regular season for them right now, but that's only because his regular season performances have been so bad. And it's not like he's being dominant out there. He's just probably a little bit of below league, about like right at league average is probably about where he's at from a edge standpoint. I'd even argue probably Carlos Dunlap's probably not outplayed him this year. Who's the other guy they brought over from us over there, who is he's not balling out, but he's doing okay. He's hanging up over there as that other edge and kind of taking snaps away from Karlaftis. I think that's probably been a bit of the impediment for George, is that can't get on the field because they probably like a little bit more of in the totality of the game they get from Dunlap, especially in being able to stop the run, because Dunlap was pretty good at that, setting the edge, and you're not going to run around him, and he's just a big man, hard to move off the edge. So, you're right. They do get by with the defense. You do like those moves they made. It seems like a couple of years ago, getting Justin Reed in there as a free agent helped them out of Texas. The linebackers they've taken in recent years, Brendan, Leo Chanel, both you and I really like that guy. Hasn't necessarily been able to get on the field, but only just because they've got a couple of linebacker crew they feel good about right now. The Nick Bolton's playing really well, and then Willie Gay is the other guy that they really do like there. So it's not a matter of Leo not being a good player, able just that they've gotten some depth there now and how they've built this team out a little bit. And this is why this team does continue to sustain itself here through the years. It's not just Mahomes and the magical mystery tour with Travis Kelce. It's also because of the way they've gone at some of these positions to build this thing up and the way that they build this monster up and done it very intelligently. And it's to me, I appreciate this part of the rebuild of it, Brendan, where you get through the first part where you get lightning in a bottle and okay, now you're having to go uphill. Now you won. Now you're paying your quarterback. Now you're going to lose some players because teams are going to start valuing them across the league and overpaying them on free agent deals. Now, what is your counter to that? What is the moves you make now to it as you have to get a little more creative? It's a little bit different from the territory of being a team that's trying to be up on the come and on the rise, and nobody's expecting anything out of you with it. And that's what's really, to me, I've appreciated. How about yourself? Do you have the kind of same viewpoint with it?
As it regards the Kansas City Chiefs specifically?
Yeah.
I mean, I like the way they try to build their defense. They build it around a pass rush, and they build it around the ability to create a few turnovers, and they think that's going to be enough. Like the Chiefs team that won the Super Bowl couldn't stop the run at all. They had a miserable run defense, one of the worst in the league, and they also actually had one of the worst rushing attacks in the league, and they just bet that their strengths were going to be enough to overcome that, and they were correct. They won the Super Bowl that year. So I think it's a very intelligent way they've built this team. I think that their front office is one of the best in the league, and there are going to be some games that get away from them because they're not very good against the run, or their defense ultimately lets them down a little bit in this game or that game. But the way they've kind of stayed ahead of things, like getting rid of, maybe they got rid of Tyreek Hill a year early. That's possible, right? But that was what they had to do. It was either that or they keep him 3 years too long.
Yeah.
So it's a very well-run NFL organization, I think. I think it's very impressive what they've managed to do over there with all this money tied up into guys like Mahomes, Kelce. I think Orlando Brown is basically saying he wants $25 million a year, if not more. So they know they're going to have to deal with that because they kind of have to give him that money. Joe Thuney, I think they gave a big contract already. So they've been able to work around these things really well. It's impressive.
It is impressive. And the Orlando Brown's going to be the next bridge for them to cross of difficulty because of how much he's demanding. And they wanted to get that contract done with him at the prior start of the year, and they couldn't get it done. And so because to your point, he was asking for that Trent Williams plus kind of money and being the next guy up. And so that's going to be interesting to see if they do continue to hold on that, even though that's their cap's going to be very much stressed in that type of situation. But that's also the benefit of maybe moving on from a guy like Tyreek Hill, that you save that money so that you can apply it if you need to back in a left tackle position, even if it's heavily so. Well, let's look at this matchup then a little bit. We got to first acknowledge, Brendan, it's going to be colder than a witch's you know what out there. I think I'm hearing that this might be a game that is the coldest game in regular season history for our Hawks potentially. You and I both remember the Minnesota Viking game in the playoffs a couple years ago, which was hellacious conditions. I mean, it was not football we were watching,
right,
in many different ways. Before we get to the breakdown of this matchup, if this goes to the conditions affecting things in that way, like that Viking game, who does that benefit?
Well, that's a good question. Obviously, the game's in Arrowhead, game's in Kansas City. You got to figure that benefits the Chiefs. And beyond just that, I'm looking at the Seahawks team, and I'm still seeing a team that their first, second, and third strength right now is passing the ball. Like, I don't believe we're going to be able to run the ball even against a team like Kansas City because our interior offensive line is just playing so bad. So I am looking at a team that is going to need to pass the ball. I don't know if these cold conditions are very conducive to it, especially when you have players that are not really familiar with those conditions. This is not, Brett Favre, who would play in these conditions every single December.
Yeah.
I cannot say it really favors us. And given the fact that this Chiefs team is used to playing in these conditions, it's hard for me to give the advantage to anybody but them on that front.
Yeah, I think I would tend to agree with you on that. If we were more balanced as a team, I might give us a bit of a nod, but you look at the Chiefs this year and the defense is better than it's been in recent years. It's been better against the run than it's been in recent years. Not that it's good against the run, but to me, Brendan, they've taken themselves from a run defending team that's in that 30s range into more middle of the road this year. And their commitment to the run's been just a tiny bit stronger, it seems like, in looking at them. And that does seem like they'll be able to kind of handle that a little bit better. That you're not necessarily going to be able to get over on them with this. Maybe the only hopeful equalizer here, Brendan, is like that Viking game. It ends up making offense somewhat kind of impossible at times, and then that maybe keeps us on a low scoring game that we can pull through into the fourth quarter and try to maybe find a way on.
Yeah, hard for me to really believe that's going to happen when this Chiefs team has played in conditions like this in previous years. Maybe not this extreme, but close.
Yeah, that's the part I wonder about, is that if that becomes where it goes even beyond just, well, it's cold conditions here, to, okay, it's -5 at game time. This is a whole nother beast, and there's really no getting used to that. That's like your body's telling you it's cold. What are you doing out here? And you can't, it's hard to kind of just, I'll go sleeveless and mind strength myself through this, just plow ahead. Well, let's look at first the offense on this matchup, kind of a matchup basis. You kind of broke that down. And let's take a look at first, I guess, the big dog that we got to stop before we get to what we do offensively, of course, where it begins with the Chiefs, is stopping them offensively speaking. High-powered offense as much as ever right now, Brendan. We just spoke about the fact they've got more of a commitment to the running game. That hasn't stopped them from throwing the football. Mahomes is still leading the league in yardage thrown. They've had games they've been hanging 40 burgers on out there. When you look at this offense and our defense, what is the pathway and approach here to playing Mahomes and us being able to hold him down and keep him in check?
I mean, that's really hard to figure out. That's what every team in the league is trying to figure out. Teams with better defenses than this. I mean, this offense put up 44 points on the 49ers.
Mm-hmm.
And we know all about those 49ers on defense. We know how good they are.
Yeah.
So I guess you could say maybe you'd rather play the Chiefs offense than the 49ers offense, because the 49ers offense seems specially created to exploit what is weak on this Seahawks defense right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just trying to figure out where we can have an advantage here, and it's really hard. We have our linebackers are generally pretty awful in coverage, and you've got to deal with Travis Kelce. We're not going to have Ryan Neal, so it can't just be a thing where you throw Ryan Neal at Kelce and hope that works out. He's out officially. You're not going to have Al Woods, so I don't know what you do on up front. I don't know. Like, your biggest defensive lineman right now is Poona Ford, 310 pounds, 5 foot. What is he? 5'2"? I don't know.
3.5, 5'3.5", Brendan.
Yeah, he's and it's like you kind of don't have a nose tackle. And I know we went out and signed a Davion Nixon this week, but honestly, he's smaller than Poona. He's like 305. He's a 3-tech, which surprised me. I thought for sure we were going to sign somebody who at least had some girth to him, but this guy we signed is like basically Jerron Reed-ish in terms of his size. So
yeah,
I don't know how we plug the run against this Chiefs team, even a run game as mediocre as this. I don't know how we stop the run. I don't know how we get pressure on Mahomes. I think we had like 3 quarterback pressures against the Niners. And this offensive line is pretty bulletproof outside of maybe Wiley at right tackle. Seems like he might be a little bit of a weakness, but
I was looking at this. We got both tackles right. Even Brown, who's been traditionally good in this realm, they're both, I think, up there as far as league lead in pressures given up on the edge.
Is that because Mahomes throws the ball so much? Because Mahomes is on pace to break, or very close to on pace to break, the all-time yardage record.
Point. Yeah.
So I look at that and I kind of go, okay, how many per attempt? Like, let's make sure we're understanding what's really going on here.
It's a good point. It's a very good point. And let's face it too, Mahomes is a guy that will hold on to the ball probably a little bit longer to try to make something happen if it's not necessarily there, initially within the program of the play. I think the thing that stands out to me though with Mahomes right now, Brendan, versus this being, let's say, 2 or 3 years ago, you had recommended that video and I'd watched it, and it was going along and there was a bit of a narrative in it about the Fangio, cover defense and some of the principles applied to why it was first applied and why it was first effective. And it was because it could stop guys like the Mahomes and Wilson, who at those times, both of them had adopted a very similar mindset of bomb city to paradise, right? I'm going to let it rip, let the big dog hunt, give me the one wood. And what happened then was defenses were going to take that away with this kind of defense. And now unlike Wilson in this respect, Mahomes has learned within his game to get a little more patient and take what the defense gives him and work his way up the
Mhm.
field. And so now you don't just have his fatal flaw that you can go after now over and over like you might have been able to do, as small as that flaw may have been. It's closed kind of up a bit, and now there's not necessarily just a magical answer here to solve
Mhm.
him and what he does.
Right. He's I mean, with no Tyreek Hill and replacing him with a guy with a yak guy like Juju, it makes sense. You got to do stuff like that, and he's proven that he's capable of it. And I know that there were some people before the season started that were a little down on Mahomes, wondering if maybe he had peaked. But in some ways, this might be his best season ever.
Yeah, if it's in many ways, if you have a weakness and then those teams hit the weakness and you show, oh God, I'm vulnerable to this, but then you find a way to then suture that weakness up. And if not make it a strength, at least make it something that teams can't just attack you in on. They've got no really where other adjustment to go to other than a sort of a randomization process in how they attack you. This is what it's applied to me, in my opinion, with like Brady, where it's you don't want to blitz Brady at this point because he'll beat you. He knows how to beat the blitz. So you just got to vary your coverages up and try to confuse him with the coverages on the back end and just randomize it and change it up and make, show him one thing and do something else. And you're still not going to trick him at that point, but that's kind of the only pathway of hope you sort of have a little bit when those quarterbacks get to that level of mastery of the game. Within, of course, Mahomes' elite skill set too, right? I'd say you'd probably
Right.
be with me as one of the most, if not the most talented quarterbacks in the league. On top of now, he's becoming refined. Scary
I
proposition.
I mean, I don't know if he has the best arm I've ever seen, but he might have the most arm talent. The stuff that he does.
Mhm.
I can't think of a quarterback I've ever seen who has more arm talent.
Yeah, I can't either. Throwing the different platforms, sidearm, no look throws. He can make all the type of throws you want. If you need him to throw a whole shot throw, if you need him to layer it in there, I maybe not. I haven't seen him do a lot of fade throws. He doesn't do a lot of that. It doesn't seem like, but
Mhm.
everything else in between, he can make the throws with great accuracy and great velocity. And he's a perfect fit with Andy Reid, who's just you've given the mad scientist. It's like giving Coach Carroll a Tariq Woolen almost. It's like you just give the guy this a quarterback that's got all the skills he could ever want for his offense, and you just let him go crazy, and that's what Reed's done. I mean, he's drawn up plays, every which way but loose. They run a lot of just their own stuff there.
Yeah, yeah, it's a very impressive machine. And again, I'm just looking at this, trying to figure out how we stop this. And I don't have the answers. I mean, nobody really has the answers, right? If somebody had
No,
the
I
answers,
think it'd be disingenuous. I think you're right to point to the fact that there's pressure. We both know that we're going to try to probably drop a lot of guys into zone coverage, and we're going to try to ask Mahomes to be patient is probably the fallback plan here, and then lean on the fact that he'll eventually become impatient. And then you got to hope that those guys in the front four are able to generate pressure, despite the fact that, as you just point out as well, they're severely undermanned, and then they're kind of outgunned a little bit too because these guys haven't been all that greatly productive from a pass rush standpoint when we have been healthy. And you're going up against an offensive line that can pass protect really well. Creed Humphrey's not going to give up any pressures up the middle. That's his bread and butter. I don't know if he'll drive you off the ball. It was making me laugh though, Brendan. I'm watching like Cincinnati tape as I'm prepping for this to just take a look at the KC Cincy game, and they got Humphrey getting down to the second level time and time again, no problem, getting up on the linebacker. All the things that people told me why we didn't draft him at that time because he couldn't get down there.
yeah,
But every time I sit down, he's doing things we would have asked him to do and seems to be doing it fine.
yeah,
And
he's doing a lot of things that he didn't really do at all at what was it, Oklahoma?
Mhm.
Yeah, Oklahoma. Like in Oklahoma, he basically did not move from where he was when the ball got snapped most of the
No.
time. But yeah, he's developed in that regard pretty phenomenally. Although obviously playing in this kind of offense surrounded by this group of players helps.
Perfect fit for him. It was an ideal spot for Creed to go for what they were going to want him to do, and he's going to be awesome for them for a very long period of time. But doesn't help you any further in getting any pressure up the middle there that if you could hope. And then so now it's like, well, we got to get it off the edges. And you mentioned the right tackle. Maybe that's the main open spot here for you to maybe really go after and get. But and that's Darrell Taylor, come on down. This is your time to shine and start stepping forward, my guy. So hopefully that's the way they do it. Absent that, Brendan, I think Mahomes, as I was just saying about a second ago, I think this is the narrative that's out there, and I think it's a correct one, which is that he's begun to get more patient. And if we just ask him to be patient, I don't think he's going to fall into the trappings of I got to let this rip at some point in this game. I'm getting bored.
Yeah. I'm thinking back to that Chiefs game we played 4 years ago, when we did kind of have a little bit something special in our back pocket to deal with that offense. I think actually Carroll had it might have been Deshaun Shedd or somebody like that follow Kelsey around.
Hmm.
Some pretty relative no-name defensive back. We just sicked him on Kelsey, and Kelsey didn't do that much. It
Yep.
was somebody like that. But also thinking back on that game, I think a big part of it was just Mahomes just missed actually quite a few throws. I
He did.
recall several throws in that game where he had it and he just missed.
Yeah, had a couple throws that were off, made a couple of plays also around it. It took every bit of our best effort to beat him at home at that point in that game. So he still took you, right down the line in that one. But I think you're getting an even more, as I was saying, a little more refined, even more patient, elder version here of Mahomes a couple of years later. And that's going to be even tougher one to deal with. The guy that's probably going to end up the MVP of this league. Chiefs probably are going to end up around that number one seed. They're dancing around it. I think the Bills got the tiebreaker with them because they did beat them, but it's hard on this one when you do the evaluation, folks, on this game to look at this Mahomes and how he's doing it, where he's doing it, and how this offense is getting their job done, and to go, okay, well, we'll take this way. Okay, well, no, we're going to take that away. Okay, we'll just to stop this. I don't know. I think as Brendon said, the hope here is that you aren't dealing with a Niner-like team or a Raider-like team or a Atlanta Falcon-like team that was just we're going to run and run and run and just hammer this. You're not necessarily getting that, and that has been the blueprint that's given our defense troubles, especially in the last 4 weeks, is that offense that will just stay and pound that ball all game long. This team will at least, Reed will go, let's throw a little bit here. Come on. I'm a Mike Holmgren disciple. I'm not running 45 times a game. Get out of here. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the thing that a lot of Seahawks fans are going to try to hold on to as we go through this week towards this game is the Chiefs, the last 2 games, it hasn't been their best, right?
Mm,
They got into a pretty close game with the Broncos, and they went to overtime with the Texans. They won both games. So let's unpack that angle just a little bit. Because I think that some Seahawks fans are a little too fixated on those things. Like that Broncos game, they were up 27-0, and then Mahomes just forgot how to protect the football, basically. I don't put a lot of stock into that.
yeah.
Like looking back at those 2 games, is there anything you think we can glean from that, watching 2 really, really bad teams play tough against Kansas City? I'm trying to find it.
No, I look at it as a team that's in the midst of their Super Bowl window and run, and not only in the midst of it, they're on like year 3 of this, right? 3, 4 of this, and they know what it takes to get this done in the regular season. They find themselves at this point in time in the year when they look at the rest of their division of it's not pushing them like maybe they thought it was going to push them in the off season, and so they're getting into these games as we're getting into the depth of the NFL schedule. This would be right around a part of the NFL schedule if you're like had already done a lot of work. You're 14 games in, 13 games in, you're going, okay, who are we playing this week? Indianapolis. Don't they have Jeff Saturday as their head coach right now? Yeah. Ugh, we got this is done. This is done. Now, like you mentioned in the Bronco game, you get up on top of them and then you're like, man, this thing is over with. And you start, it's a human nature. You start to check out a little bit. You start to ease off the stick a little bit. You just get a little bit cozy with what you're thinking about. And suddenly that in the NFL, it's a competitive sport and the team will take advantage of that if you take your foot off that gas. But my long suspect part of the way I look at this, Brendon, is that this Chiefs team just they've had the finger on the cruise control button. They hit it. They got one little finger on the steering wheel. They've taken their feet off. They've got their shoes kicked off, right? They're to bare boned feet. They're just kind of waiting for the playoffs, taking the sun in, sticking their head out of the car, letting the sun hit their face. That's what strikes me right now is that's more than anything on that. And maybe they look at us in that same way, in that same vein, an NFC team that looks like they're playing their worst footballs right now, coming into our house, 7-degree temperature, maybe they start thinking about being a little bit more warmer and like, let's just get this thing over with and get to, next week. I mean, that's kind of my hope on this one.
I mean, there is something to be said. We know that sports teams do this. Sometimes they just show up enough to win. They don't show up enough to win by as many points as they can. This is not college football. NFL teams, sometimes they just go, okay, what's the bare minimum we need to get this win? It's like quiet quitting for an NFL team, I guess. I don't know. But
Yeah.
you don't need to win every game by 60 points, even if you can.
Yeah.
So
So it's the
I
Michael.
don't put much into it.
It's like the Michael Jordan thing, like when he didn't give you everything every night. If you turned him on and he still was great, not giving you 100%. But if he had to turn it on in a moment, or it's the fourth quarter, I got to get this clicked in. Okay, it's time to let's really turn this on. And there's players, and not just he was capable of doing that. There's players in other sports and football like this. I think the Chiefs are in that kind of same mode right now as a team where they're at. So, hopefully you can catch them that way. But they've got this on a matchup standpoint, at least offensive side of the ball. I think here pretty hemmed up on us, where this defense is going to struggle in this kind of game. I think they're going to have to hold on for dear life just to keep them at 30 points, I think, at times. And maybe that will be at the heart of Carroll's game plan and Hurt's game plan of, let's just make them earn this. We know they're going to get the point. We'll make them grind these points out. We'll make them, work it through our defense. And
it seems like that's the game plan most weeks, and lately it hasn't worked out great. So
yeah, well said. Well said. Well, let's turn it over to the offense then, and that would mean our offense is going to have to carry the day, which is a stark order indeed. Not because this Chiefs defense is necessarily exceptionally tough, but the conditions we're going to be playing in and where the offense has been playing lately. Is there anything in this matchup that gives you a little bit brighter hope that the offense begins to play a little bit better in this particular game than what we've seen over the last 4 weeks of performance?
Well, it seems like we're going to have at least a full backfield in this game, because it sounds like Walker and DJ are going to play. So that's good. I wish I could say the same for our interior offensive line, but it's probably going to be the same mess that it's been lately. But maybe you're going to be able to find a bit of a running game in this one. If Walker's at 100%, maybe he can do some things that he just wasn't able to do, like last week against the Niners, in terms of creating, in terms of making plays for himself. So I guess there's that. I do think that you take a look at this Kansas City pass rush, and other than Chris Jones, it's not great. I do have a little bit of concern about our offensive tackles, who are still playing really well, hitting a bit of a rookie wall. Maybe we're just going to see less effective play from them over the next few weeks. I think that's a very realistic possibility. But for the most part this year, you would say they've done their job. So maybe we can at least keep up. The way I feel about this game is very reminiscent of the way I felt about the Washington-Oregon game. What was that? About a month and a half ago, where I didn't expect to win, but I expected the offense to at least make it fun. And obviously the Huskies ended up winning that game. But I remember kind of feeling the same way about that game as I do about this game. I'm just like, okay, just show that you belong, because this defense should be able to give you some things. You don't have Lockett, which is a huge deal, by the way. I don't want to downplay that at all. That's a huge deal. But you're going to have Goodwin. You're going to have Fant. It looks like those guys are ready to play. I think Carroll said he expects both of them to play. So, show me that you can get things done systematically rather than just based off the pure raw talent of the players, right? Like do what Kansas City does. You lose a guy like Lockett and you have to sub in this case, I don't know who it's going to be. It might be Penny Hart. It might be Bo Melton. It might be Derek Young. I don't know who it's going to be, but show me you can insert another piece into the machine and still get good production. Do the Andy Reid thing. That's what Andy Reid did this season, right? He loses Tyreek Hill. Oh, well, I'll find other ways. So this is kind of the final level as an offensive coordinator, and let's see if Waldron can manage that.
It's a good point. I'd agree with you. I think you've got to maintain your game plan and what it's been as of late. I think the running game is going to struggle because it's just struggled, and there's not a lot of hope there for some of this just comes down to talent issue, especially here on the interior line. We just don't have guys that can push other guys off the ball. And Chris Jones is a good overall player. He's both a good run stuffer, and he can get to the backfield and penetrate. It'll be interesting to watch on this game, Brendon, is that Aaron Donald's a guy that wrecked shop here with us for 10 years. And then when you watch the game, and when I would really concentrate on the game, you really didn't double team him very often, especially in pass protection. And it stood out a lot of times. Do you think what would you go over under on the amount of times when we dropped back to pass that they double team Chris Jones? Because I'd probably put it at 20% or lower, I would say, in those kind of situations. I'd like to see it much higher.
You'd hope they'd learn their lesson at some point, man. Especially in a week like this where you're looking at that Chiefs defensive line. They've got that Derek Nyandi guy who seems like he's pretty bad, not a big threat. You've got Karlaftis, who is not having a very good rookie year. There are some weaknesses on this line that you can afford to one-on-one. There are some real guys on this line that can be neutralized one-on-one. But if you could just throw two guys at Chris Jones, I do believe life would become easier. But it does seem like there's a real addiction with this Seahawks team of just trying to do things straight up. And obviously some of our bad habits, we talk about this sometimes. Some of our bad habits in recent years we're starting to move away from, and it's been a very welcome sight. This seems like one we're still struggling a little bit with, like not double teaming Max Crosby at the end of that Raiders game when, he was the one guy who was killing you, and you gave him two opportunities to blow up plays at the end of that game that cost you.
That's a great point. And that's something I've just seen through the years. It's established again, I think, to your point on that, the base philosophy of the team from where Carroll resides on this, which is to say, no, we're not going to deal with you. We're not going to adjust to you. We're not going to do kind of the Belichickian way of it. We'll go opposite Belichickian way where you got to deal with us because we'll be so good in what we do, that does sound great in theory. And when you got the horses to get it done, it can maybe even work. But when you don't have the horses to get it done, it's just the offenses go, okay, you do what you do. We'll go out there and take a little bit of an advantage. But I just have visions of Austin Blythe getting bent backwards by Chris Jones, single blocked up after Jones lines up as a zero tech or something on a play. I'm worried a little bit about that in this particular one.
You should be.
But I think it is they do have to remain balanced, Brendan. I don't know if you saw, there was a cool little mic'd up moment on the sideline between Waldron and Gino that was on Twitter here today, was showing up, where Gino's telling Waldron, we got to keep running. Like it almost like he's like, I know, even if it's not working, we got to keep running. And if we got to throw, then we'll throw. And it was interesting to see Gino telling him that, which I think was an acknowledgement to Waldron, where Gino knows Waldron's been in this bind in recent weeks where he knows the running game isn't working. He wants to remain balanced, but it's the passing game that's the efficient process here throughout the season that's been the consistent mode. So it's Gino almost in that moment going, I know you're leaning into this with the play calling a little bit here, Shane, but we got to make sure we're remembering to stay in that, like, can't go too far in this direction of things. But I think that moment when I heard it mic'd up on the sideline was a little bit of an insight, I think, into the offense right now in Waldron, where he's going, my guys can't get anything going here in the run game. I've got nothing to really draw from here, no matter what I kind of dial up. But the passing game, has remained what it somewhat is, even though it's struggled in recent weeks. It has been diminishing, which is why Gino probably was saying, like, we're going to lose out some of our effectiveness if we just don't, run it all.
Yeah. I understand the temptation. I understand the need to do it. But at the same time, you're definitely not going to beat the Chiefs if you're just running the ball up the middle for 2 yards carry every time.
Yeah. Well, and even 2 yards of carry is almost a greedy thing at this point, because there's a lot of times it's negative carries consistently coming out the box on that because of the penetration that's there. And it's a bit of the tough bind that does exist in this game, where you're going to, like we talked about, this Chiefs offense on the road, they're going to score their points. It means you got to score your points. It's not a Niner game where your hopeful window a Niner game is you get into a 17-14 game. Carroll referenced this, where it's like, we're hoping to kind of get into one of those low scoring games, and that's how we win. The only way you're really coming out of this win with this is you're putting 27, 30, 34 points up on the board, which it means you got to find some effectiveness here offensively. But I would say we're going to both watch this game and see them probably throwing here more often than not in this game, right? Like, this is probably another game that comes down to 65% of the time you're going to be hucking the rock. And
and I don't have a big problem with that. I understand that is our strength right now as a team.
No, not at all. And it's a path. It's been a pathway to victory so far this year, Brendan. And, even if the defense does struggle, if you have the offense that can be good, as we saw this week with the special teams unit now getting right now, Seahawks special teams unit being the number one in football with a really nice, this dynamic returner kid, this Ugabugabike. I can't say his name, but he's added that extra element to this special. Let's call him Godwin. He's added that extra element now to the game on special teams, which maybe that'll be enough to kind of lean you in to kind of push this one up over the top and give you just a little bit, you get a turnover or two at the right moment, a fumble or two, and you can kind of break things back your way and get a short field for the offense.
Can we unpack the Godwin thing for 1 second here? Just talk about it for a second.
Absolutely.
How does that guy sit on your practice squad for 3-4 months while you have no special teams returning ability whatsoever? And then, like, you have to play him, and then you're like, oh, this is our best return man.
My theory is that it comes down to, if you're going to bring him on the roster like this, I don't think that they necessarily trust him as a running back as much as they like him as a returner, would be my theory. And that with your running back situation this year, Homer got the chest injury early on, Rashad Penny goes down. You're always in a place this year where it seems like you're down to like 2 running backs at any given time, and that they didn't feel comfortable having that roster spot that would essentially have them being able to carry one less running back, to have the return specialist who will give them even a 10-yard better average than DJ Dallas, not worth it. It doesn't mean that I'm happy about that, by the way, Brendan, but I think that that's the reason why they did it. As far as that would make some sense to me, but it is certainly a difference with him in there versus Dallas. I mean,
I gotta believe that he's adding more value than Derek Young playing like 2 snaps a game.
I'm with you there, but that it's not as much about the Derek Young playing the snaps as much about, okay, what happens if this receiver goes down? Who do we got to call upon? And you know how it goes with these NFL game day rosters where there's some positional groups where you're like, if this guy and this guy goes down, we're kind of SOL. If we don't have we're gonna have to like bring this guy up over here and put him into this at this guard position to make it work. So I think that there's sometimes a bit of some shaky ground you got as far as your depth goes, where you're like, yeah, we've got enough guys right now at the moment. But if this guy and this guy has this thing happen, then, we're in trouble. And remember, injury situation with it is like, you've got Eskridge has been injured for most of this year, one way or another, because he always is. And then you've got, DK Metcalf, who had the patella thing for a second. That was probably a scare. So you had a little bit of a worry there, on that. But he should be, look, we got club control going in the future. You've got a guy who's got some earmarks here, maybe being a potential top end returner in this league. You want to make a great special teams unit. That's one of the purposeful approaches you have as a football team. So I say lean into this type of stuff, right? Like,
yeah, hopefully.
Ideally suit him out of role and roster construct yourself around to next year where you've got that roster spot for him, because it's how you value your team. I agree with you. There's better value there than keeping that back, but I think it's more reliant on you having that foresight and, prior to training camp of how you're building your roster and what your game day roster is going to look like and who's active and who isn't and how you manage that.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Mark Sanchez with a $5 donation. Thank you, Mark. I really do appreciate it. Says, hey guys, would either of you draft Andre Carter in the first round? And I don't know if you've had a chance to look at Andre Carter as of yet. He's the Army guy.
First round seems a little early. I would say top of the second. Now you're talking. But first round, especially with where our first rounders are probably going to be, no thank you.
Yeah, I see him a little bit probably lower than some do off of my tape look of him. I like the size of him. I like the explosiveness of him. And he definitely plays hard. I don't know if there's a whole lot of other stuff about him that jumps out to me, though, in his skill set. And he is a bit of a one-year wonder at Army where, okay, he has the 15 sacks a year ago. He's got 3 this year. And if you look 2 years prior, he had nothing before that. So he's playing for Army. He's not in the SEC. He's not going up against the tougher competition. I see that kind of drop off after a year like 15 sacks, and I go, that seems to be a little bit of like maybe we've got some problem fool's gold here diving in on this one. He's got an NFL size kind of body. He can definitely move like a guy at the next level, but he's kind of a one-trick pony on his pass rush. He's just going to try to explode past you. And so it's those kind of guys I get increasingly more of like, I maybe late second in that, but I'm not as high on him with that stuff because of that. I think he's a little bit of the one-year wonder.
Yeah. Is he an edge or is he a defensive lineman?
He's 6'7", so he's an edge. I mean, he's a defensive end or he's an outside linebacker. They've had him stand up. The one thing I don't know about you, but if you tell me I got a guy standing up at 6'7", I'm like, oh, really? So he's going to like out that big because those guys are like giraffes, kind of get moving off the ball when they're that big, trying to do the stand up thing, as opposed to like we'll watch for Dunlap. Remember that was the thing with Dunlap, is big 6'7" guy. But when you watch him when he loads up into his stance, he just gets really, really low with it. So he doesn't lose that leverage point. Calais Campbell was like this too. If you watch Calais, where he gets really low for a guy that's 6'7", to make sure that guy who's smaller than him can't just hit, whoop him on the leverage stuff and get up under his pads. Cause that's how you win in football, is the man who gets the leverage often is the guy who wins. You have Andre Carter standing up at 6'7". You naturally lose that leverage when you go high as a stand-up linebacker versus when you do go low to be able to protect yourself from some of that little bit. And his comp for me is a less refined Jason Taylor, who was the Miami Dolphins edge. Mm-hmm. And he looks very similar to him, but that guy was a defensive end. I do wonder if maybe Andre, that his best pot is as a down defensive end guy in a 4-3 defense.
Yeah. I'm looking at him as more of a second rounder, I guess, is what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah. He's an interesting prospect though, Mark, and I appreciate the donation. It's not that I don't like him, but I do if I'm starting to see some lack of refinement on these pass rushers, if you go look right now, for instance, at the rookies that were the top end rookies in this draft, that were actually some of the refined guys in this draft. Nobody's lighting the world on fire out the gate here as far as what they're doing, and that leads me to believe I've got to build in more time for the guy to have to round out his skill set, which means waiting a couple of years, like what we're watching with Darrell Taylor. Maybe the light bulb goes on next year with Taylor, and suddenly I've developed a little bit of refinement, but now by year 4, But when you make those picks at that high point, I want a little bit more of an immediate return and less having to wait for the cake to bake.
Mm-hmm.
So we're both admitted when we look at this offense, with our offense to this defense of the Chiefs, that they're going to have to probably throw to win the day. In looking at the Chiefs, to me, Brendon, they play pretty disciplined football. They're not going to really allow a lot of deep plays. So it is, to me, a lot of going to have to earn your way up the field a little bit with this defense. Would you say you seen the same thing in looking at this team?
Yeah, I'd say that's a pretty accurate assessment. They keep it's kind of a typical NFL defense these days, where
Mm-hmm.
they let up some of the shorter and more intermediate stuff to try to take away the deep stuff.
Yeah.
And against most teams, that's probably the right thing to do. I think that's why you've seen so many teams adopt these offenses that are built around the short and intermediate stuff. Like, we went over this about a month ago. Very few offenses in the NFL right now are really built around the deep ball. Even the Broncos with Russell Wilson at quarterback have kind of really scaled that stuff back as much as they can.
Yeah. Yeah. Teams have made it, and it's as much at the forefront of this Fangio scheme is taking away those deep, and with that proliferating more of the NFL, you're going to then vis-a-vis have more teams that are going to try to protect against that deep ball because of that. So it is a good point with it, and it's now a little bit about being patient. This is also probably why a little bit of the running game has taken a step forward this year in the NFL, and it started to come back to a little bit more prominence than in years past, because that's also what you do when you protect against a deep ball, of course, usually, which is that you're going to also probably have maybe one less guy up near the box, one less strong safety up there to help out in that run game. They do run a 4-3 defense. They do some exotic stuff, Brendon. So they're not just going to do like we do, or here's your 4-3 defense, and we're just going to run that same coverage every time. They will run blitzes. They'll try to come at you from different angles. They might even do some zone blitz stuff, pulling linemen back in coverage. So Gino's going to need to be on his P's and Q's this week in making sure that he's seen it right and clear, which has been a struggle in sometimes in recent weeks for Gino, unlike most of the year.
Yeah. Lately I have noticed there have been a couple of those blindside blitzes where Gino never sees the guy. So a little bit of slippage there. So definitely something to keep in mind.
Yeah, it's going to be, I think, a big key to that is Waldron getting those plays in quick for Gino, giving him the time up the play clock so he doesn't have to think about the play clock as he comes to the line, and he can take that extra beat, that extra little bit of time to kind of just get that, like you said, on those blindside blitzes. Because when I saw those happen, it really seemed to come from me of Gino just going, I'm locked in, got to make another play, And you get got to make another play. Well, he doesn't just not thinking about that guy coming off the edge. He's just thinking about making the play, and he's just snapping the ball in that same kind of rhythm, so to speak, for a couple plays, and the defense picks up on it. Especially a great defense like the Niners will pick up on that type of stuff.
Right.
And so go back to that patience, Gino. Go back to that, just like you did earlier on in the year. Take your time. You got all the time in the world sometimes with the way Waldron will call these plays. And I really like that about that. He seemed at his best this year when he really was taking that time to kind of just fully kind of surgically slice through what he was seeing on the field. Mm-hmm. He tends to see it right when he does that, it seems like, doesn't he? Yeah. So the odds are long here, but do you see this team being able to put up that 30, 34 points in this team? Do you see where we're at right now? Or do you think we just fall just short because the running games will be enough to not allow us to be balanced enough, kind of like we've seen in recent weeks?
I mean, if we had Lockett, maybe I would say, with Lockett, I'd say things are a little more possible, but knowing that we don't really have any way to replace him, because you've got who's going to replace Lockett? Derek Young?
I think what they're going to do is they'll put Derek Young to the outside and kick Goodwin inside, and we'll keep him, not kick him inside. They'll just keep Goodwin inside so that you're not changing two positions for one at that point. And I think that they actually have a very, and I think you'd feel the same way about this. They've got a little bit of confidence in Derek and where he is at right now, that he's been out there getting a lot of run blocking snaps and whatnot this year when he's been out there and the few times he's been out there, but they do seem to like him and how they favored him so far out the gate of this season.
Yeah, 0 career catches, though. At the end of the day, it's hard to put a lot of faith into that when you've got a guy like Lockett who is putting together one of the great 4 or 5 year runs by any Seahawks receiver ever.
No, I feel you there, but he's also coming into this year. He's not only behind the first two guys who stay pretty healthy and on the field pretty continuously. You run a lot of 2 tight end sets, so you're not really like one of those 3-4 wide receiver laden teams. He had
Right.
Marquise Goodwin ahead of him first that he had to overtake. Then he had to overtake Penny Hart, which that there's been some back and forth. So I mean, I feel you on that, but it's also opportunities, and it's not like he's been out there. We've got a lot of all 22 tape to watch of him not getting open or whatever. And I thought he was pretty impressive in the preseason. I don't think he's ready to be a star or anything like that, but I do think he's a guy that is a interesting piece as we look forward, and a guy that might be giving this coaching staff a little bit more confidence as they look to this draft and this free agent period to not be pressed as much as some people are already kind of talking in my chat about at times, needing to go look for that wide receiver, and that being a kind of not a high priority, but being kind of a sub priority of this offseason. Do you view that right now in the same way with where you look at the receiver position going into this offseason, or do you look at a little higher priority?
I'm pretty open-minded on that, honestly. Like, for years, it seems like people have praised our receiver depth, and then those guys never do anything. Like, great example, John Ursua, right? People kept talking about Ursua, and then he just never played. And
Yeah.
then he was off the team. I mean, Bo Melton could easily turn into that, right? Like, I like Bo Melton. I like Derek Young. I mean, I remember I used to like Aaron Fuller a lot. That didn't work out.
Yeah.
Like over and over again, it seems like these guys, people talk about them. They're like, oh, this guy's really impressing in practice. And then they never do anything in a real game. So if we wanted to spend a blue chip pick on a receiver, I'm not saying it's my preference, but I would say it's a consideration because right now it seems like we've got very little depth, and Goodwin's a free agent, by the way.
He is. I don't think he'll command a whole lot out there, but he is a free agent. You never know. There may be a team that sees some value in him to do that. So if they go Quentin Johnson in the first round out of TCU with the second first round pick, you'd be understandable of that selection at that point.
I'm more of a Jordan Addison fan, but on a fundamental level, I would say, yeah, I'm open to it.
Okay. Yeah, and see, for me, I'd be a little bit more hesitant because I just think there's such bigger holes on this team, and there'll be better players for those holes of those picks.
You're probably right. I probably agree. Like, I'm gonna start putting some mock drafts together soon, and I can tell you that the guys in that range who I'm looking at much more, are like Foskey, Jared Verse, Isaiah Wilson. Although at this rate, Isaiah Wilson's going to be the number 1 overall pick. Like he is rocketing up those draft boards.
Jeez.
I'm sorry. Is that the guy's name? The
Tyree
Texas
Wilson?
line? Tyree Wilson. Thank you. I don't know why I said Isaiah Wilson. Yeah, Tyree Wilson.
Yeah, I could very well see him firing into even the top 5, especially if he tests out as freakishly as I think he might test out, where he's going to have like gargantuan arms and he'll put 25 reps on the bench and then he'll run a 4.6 40 and crazy 10-yard split. Like that guy could definitely vault him up. That's one of those things where those workouts then click in, is that final, people are already kind of hot on a guy, and then he goes out with a workout like that and it's like, oh, close it down, he's in. That's gonna be and he's got special size traits that you don't find, even though this draft's got some giants, Brendon. He's a giant amongst giants a little bit, that Tyree Wilson guy.
Yeah, so there are options that I like more, but I'm not against the idea of receiver. I like receiver more than tight end, honestly, because a lot of people are saying we should take Michael Mayer in the first round, which that one I don't get at all.
No, I unless you're committing to running 3 tight end sets at a very high rate next year, where you're just like, this has been good, we're going to run this like 50% of the time. That's the only way that I could even think of that being even possible. So I don't get the Michael Mayer talk either. It just doesn't. I've seen him mocked us on a couple of mocks, and I'm just going, where are people getting this right now? You've got 3 good tight ends. I mean, Parkinson's caught every pass but one pass thrown to him on the few times he's had it thrown his way. These guys block, these guys catch, these guys pass block and run block. Whether you're not missing anything from the tight end position, it's nowhere near right now a problem on this team right now, nor will it be going into next year. It's part of activating that 5th-year option with Fant, I think, is that you get to the opportunity to go, I don't have to think of that for one more year at the very least, in this situation. But yeah, that one's been an odd one, Brendon. I'm seeing that one. I'm like, really? You're looking at this team looking the same. We need a tight end right now. So the first thing that draws your mind. Kelly, how you doing, Kelly? Thank you for the $2 donation. It says, maybe Kenny playing at Michigan State. Let's hope.
Is this about Ken Walker?
Kenny Walker. I'm trying to think.
Because he played at Michigan State, right?
Yeah. Kelly, you're going to have to put more into your put something in the comment section on what you meant on that one.
Yeah, I'm not
I'm
following.
missing something. Thank you for the $2 donation, but I was hoping Brendan had a little more clarity on that one. I wasn't quite getting either. Maybe Kenny playing at Michigan State. Let's hope.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Huh. Yeah,
Gotta
I'm
play.
not sure.
Sorry, but put it down. I'll look for your message down there, Kelly. If I'm not, maybe I'm just not understanding on that one. But post it down. We'll jump on it. I'm sure maybe it's missing a word in there sometimes. Mark Sanchez with another $5 donation. Thank you, Mark. Brendan had a short vid on John wanting to move on from Pete. Your guys' thoughts. I didn't have a chance to check that video out of yours. What were your?
I basically just said there's maybe some reason to believe that it might be true, but I looked into it. The Albright guy, the guy
Yeah.
who said it, he's a Broncos beat reporter.
Mm-hmm.
So even though it's not like the NFL Rumors Twitter account. I set up a bot in my Discord server, so if anybody posts a tweet from that account, they instantly get banned. It's not like that, but it's also somebody who doesn't necessarily have any inside information. He's just speculating. And what I did say was that I think Pete and John look at football very differently. So maybe there is some friction there, but I'm not convinced that anything is going to come of it.
Yeah, the more I thought about it with the two, Mark, and looking at the Benjamin Albright guy, and there were some people I was hearing out there that said that he's a little bit of throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks kind of reporter. And I'd seen his name a little bit at times through things, and certainly coming from the Denver media side of this, like even if it had come from like a Miami reporter was saying it, it would raise less of my warning signs because it's coming from Denver. You're going, oh yeah, so it's like some bitter idiot out there in Denver who's trying to stir stuff up because he's mad about the fact that his organization's screwed because we screwed him and we're getting their picks, and it's a bitter. Everyone's got a different way of trying to swallow that bitter pill, and his way of swallowing them. Oh, yeah, it's what I heard. I think from my and Brendan's standpoint, we both think alike on this, Mark. Though, where we look at it and we say, it would make sense if that was the case. And maybe that's why this guy did it and tweeted, if you were looking from the outside in and covering this team or looking at him just any kind of close way, you'd come away going, I could see how there could be some difference of opinion here, especially when it comes down to absent this last draft, Brendan. When you look at the 10-year period prior, you have a general manager who could be overruled by a coach at any given time on any personnel matter, on any trade. That at the very least on a 1% level hinders a general manager. Even if it's the most hands-off coach, they're still not being able to run unbridled, are they? It is still a little bit of an unusual situation general managers normally find themselves in.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard. It's hard because it seems like every time you have one person be the coach and GM, it fails. Or maybe it succeeds for a little while and then it fails. So I don't know what the answer is here because clearly that doesn't work well either.
Yeah. I think you just got to give the guy that if you have a general manager, there's a set of rules. Football's been doing this for many different years. I think if we look at Brendan, the Super Bowl winners over the last 30 years, just to take current data and all the times that you've had coaches who have been tried as the general managers and coaches or have that club control, I think you would find that the amount of times that they're really truly winning, especially if you can take out a little bit of the Bill Belichick factor, because some of that's obviously connected to the Brady thing, and his control's been in and out a little bit on that, and he's not been necessarily great with that. So I still think you'd come down to saying that it's not the smartest way to. It's really it's the less likely road to go to get yourself to a Super Bowl, and having the guy that just does his job and the coach that does his job. And I think it's going further and closer and quicker this direction into the future, Brendan, because I think stuff's becoming more specialized. We might have, hell, even general managers right now aren't they're not their own cap guys. You got a general manager, you got your cap guy, you got your personnel department, your pro player personnel guy. Things are even specialized up at that top level. It speaks to the layer of detail that's involved there in order to keep your eye on kind of the prize of what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting conundrum, but I think we clearly see that more compartmentalization is good, but it also, I've referenced this thing many, many times where you have like the Marquise Blair pick, where clearly, I think, especially in hindsight, we can say Pete did not want Blair, but John did. So we got Blair, and Pete seemed like he decided from day one, I don't want to use this guy. I'm just not going to play him. And that happens sometimes when you have a different coach than, a coach and a GM that are different people.
Yeah, I agree. Something went wrong there because the guy wasn't really given that chance. And there were times when he was put in, he did play pretty well. It wasn't like we've seen so many other guys come through here, Brendan, that have come in and been given a chance, fall on their face, put another chance out there, fall on their face again, put another chance out there, fall on their face again. For him to not get any kind of run at all does speak to he was in some kind of doghouse somewhere with that. And it didn't always make, a ton of sense versus what you were seeing from him on the football field. So I do think that's the case. And I don't know where the dynamic is at right now and how it stands, but it would make sense from a general manager standpoint. You're a little bit perturbed the fact that there's been times your coach has come in and done stuff. I maintain too. I do not believe Schneider would have done the Jamal Adams trade.
Oh, absolutely.
Absent Coach Carroll having a huge push on that. That's nowhere near his vicinity of a kind of move he'd want to make at all. Well, let's we got one more. Sorry, another donation here. Thank you again, Mark, for the double dono. You're awesome. James Richard with a $5 donation. Thank you, James. I appreciate you. Says, will Bronco fans and NFL analysts regret what they're saying about Russ next year? Ooh, thank you for the $5 donation. And that's a great question, my man. What do you think? What do you think about that one? I'm gonna let you lead with that one.
I mean, I don't think he's ever going to be an elite quarterback again. He'll probably be better than this, but that's because it's impossible to be as bad as this. Like, I mean, genuinely, their offense, like, I'm not saying it was good against the Cardinals necessarily, but it looked more like an NFL offense with Rippon than Wilson. It actually was able to matriculate the ball down the field. It wasn't just, incomplete. Oh, 50-yard play, incomplete. It was actually like, it made sense the way that offense worked in that game. Of course he'll be better than that, just by, if for no other reason, just sheer randomness, because it's hard to be this bad. But I just think the things that have to happen for Wilson to become like good again, to where Denver fans feel like, yeah, you know what, that was a bad trade, but at least we got something out of it. Too much has to happen.
I don't think I disagree with anything you said with it. I'm a little more probably bearish, bullish. I forget which term's the right one when I get bullish on him bouncing back. I think Brendan's point stands that it's one of those, you have nowhere else to go but up when you reach rock bottom. And if Russ hasn't hit rock bottom this year, it's going to get hard to watch. So, your worst quarterback in the NFL, you can go up. Is he going to be decimated like the Broncos have been decimated by injuries next year? Maybe not, but then the Broncos have been one of the most injured teams in football over the last 4 or 5 years. So what's the proof that that's going to stop? It's a little bit like saying, the offensive line suddenly going to magically learn how to pass protect. I was pointing to that stuff this offseason and saying that was going to be a thing that was going to upend that offense. There's no real hope for this down road approach that gets fixed this offseason. They haven't had guys stepping forward of the young guys. Bowles is going to come off a torn ACL, so probably not at full health into the next year, even probably halfway into the year. You might be able to go draft a guy, but how ready they're going to be and if they're going to be the right fit. And it doesn't take away from the bottom line with Russell, which is that a lot of the problems that have popped up with Russell were stuff I was also talking about a couple of years ago that have not been corrected for years now. Maybe he finally learns he needs to correct them now. But all of those little tiny items I've talked about that are the neck up stuff, James, getting better pre-snap, getting better against the blitz, knowing where your hot route is in, getting better on short and intermediate as far as the passing game goes, throwing within better anticipation. A lot of the things that have made Geno Smith so great this year and so dynamic in this offense are the very things that Russ struggles with. He has control to fix them, James. It's heads up stuff, but he's got to decide to fix them. And it might be a little bit too late in the process for him to put those fixes in there. So I'm a little bit of the person who say, I don't know if he gets out of the 20s as a quarterback next year in a best case scenario. I think you're still looking at him as instead of he's 31, he's maybe 22nd. But yeah. I don't buy that he's fixing things or the Broncos have a pathway to fix things here, and that they're very much in somewhat of a stuck situation. I still think that there's even an outside chance that they deep six the whole thing. And I know as crazy as that is, and everyone's going, no, the money that they would, if they just decided they're going to, rather than being bad for the next 2 to 3 years, as we think is likely to happen, no matter what we do with Russ, if they come to that conclusion, or I pull this Band-Aid all off in one fell swoop, but then I get to start from scratch and I'm not beholden to anything beyond that year. That might look more and more like an enticing proposition to the Walton family, who are not scared to write a check, And it's, it all comes down to their belief on if they can fix it. Because Brendon, do they want to do that just because they're told they're being beholden to that contract, that they got to be stuck with Russell for 3 years because, well, nobody will eat 100 million. Nobody will eat 100 million. Well, they said a few years ago, no one eat like the 26 million we ate, or the money that the Rams ate for Stafford, or the money that the Eagles ate for Carson Wentz. So it's a lot more, but I don't know. It's probably a crazy thought, but I think
I don't think they do that. But again, I do believe that Wilson, I don't think he's going to do the things he needs to do to become a good quarterback again.
Yeah.
I think that what he needs to do requires locking himself in a room all off season with some tape and figuring out how to read a defense. Like, I still remember me and some other guys were on the Discord during that Broncos Chargers game back in like week 6, talking about how, the Chargers just run the same coverage over and over. It was, I think, man on one side, quarters on the other side. This is quarterbacking 101. All Wilson has to do is hit these slants, and the whole game, he didn't do it. He had like 5 completed passes in the last 55 minutes of that game. And all he had to do was read quarters on one side, man on the other. And the fact that he wasn't able to solve that and wasn't able to get it done in that game, it shows you how much work he needs to do in the offseason. And I just don't believe that he's going to do it because it requires giving up so much that I think is right now more important to him.
Yeah, and I'm always a big guy too, James, with a great point by the boy, Brendon. You hit out of the park with that answer. I'm a big believer as well, James, if I look for a track record in recent history of something like this happening. Who's a quarterback who got by on physical ability, who started to kind of understand their game into their 30s as their physical skill sets started to erode. Maybe Michael Vick had kind of 1 year like that with Andy Reid and the Eagles, I guess. But they really are few and far between where you have those guys who do that. And in Vic's case, it took an offensive mastermind like Reid who could bring him along. Who's going to be the offensive mastermind going to the Broncos?
And like 30 dropped interceptions.
Right. That is as well a big part of it. So it could happen, James. It's harder to predict though, because is Wilson's light bulb going to go on above his head in the understanding of what it will take for me to reclaim some of my greatness, if it's even reclaimable at this point. And that's on Wilson to decide and determine. James with the $2 donation says, well said and detailed. Well, thank you, man. That's what we try to do here is give the kind of the all the way around answer on these kind of things. Kind enough to donate for us. Appreciate you on that, James. Red Ace with a $10 donation. Thank you, Red Ace. It says, happy holidays, fella. By the way, Merry Christmas, Brendon. I don't think I've told you that. And happy holidays.
Merry Christmas, yeah.
Appreciate you, Red Ace. Thank you for that. It says, in my ideal world, the Hawks would go all out in 2025 and Pete retires with a second ring. Let's load up. Can't have too many defensive ends and wide receivers, especially if we want to play deep, if we want to do a deep playoff run. That's where the bread and butter is on many teams. That's where those are two of the most valuable positions in the entire sport, Red Ace. What do you think about that?
Saying you're going to plan to go all out in 2025, that's pretty distant into the future here.
That would be pretty far. You're talking about a whole nother 2 seasons, Red Ace, of just kind of placating through on it. You could obviously find your cap situation in point by 05 with rolling money over. And if you want to really design yourself for 1 year to just really let it rip. But boy, that would take a lot of patience that NFL teams don't tend to have if you're trying to, set that stage.
That's what the Sixers did, right?
Trust the process.
Yeah. They threw away 4 seasons to get Embiid, Simmons, Okafor, and I think there was one other guy. And they basically,
the UW
I don't think. Oh yeah, Fultz. But you don't have to do that in the NFL. We have so many great examples of teams flipping the books and just resetting everything in 2 years. So I don't think you need to do that.
I would say the same thing on Brennan's point with that Ray Dace is that if we were in a different sport, I might be more aligned with saying, yeah, give it that couple of years because that's the nature of this sport with the guaranteed contracts of baseball or basketball. But because football allows you to get out from under contracts, because football allows you to really return to prominence quickly because of the parity throughout the league, you could get back in there a lot quicker and have a stage set to go forward in a year where your team will be ready to go, especially on the back of all these picks this year. I can understand people saying, well, you'll have those 4 rookies next year probably starting on top of you got only your second year guys of your 6 rookies that started this year. But then by the time I get to next year, I'm year 2 of these guys. I'm year 3 of these guys. I'm not yet paying any of them big money. I mean, that would be to me, if you're wanting to do that, let's set to the place of an all-in place of here's the year we do it, because then you could say to me, Brendan, 2024, I could understand saying that at that point, saying that's the year, is that season. Because at that point, then the Rams are toast, no Donald, no Stafford. The Niners are definitely feeling all their contracts / some of those guys like Trent Williams are probably near retirement, if not retired. And the Cardinals are going to be the joke of an organization that they kind of always are. So, you definitely could be in the right time, right place at that point too.
Yeah. I mean, I just don't think, like, I get some people in my chat sometimes who talk about like we need to trade these draft picks and we need a tank to get Archie Manning. And I just don't think any NFL team is thinking that far in advance.
No.
So I would say the same thing to a comment like this, where teams just don't think that far ahead.
Yeah. I don't think they think that far ahead necessarily in that realm. Though Seattle has said they've got a 2-3 year plan. Schneider sometimes is said, I don't know how much they fit to it or what align to it, but it all is going to depend radius on how these young guys do over this year, over next year. Then you'll know where you're at and when you can, hit that go switch. But it is key to your point on this, Red Ace, and thank you for the donation, that you want to make sure you're timing this right. You want to make sure you have the team in the right spot when you choose to put all of those chips to the center of the table, not do like the Saints have done in recent years where they're like, oh no, it's all this year. And we just missed last year. Well, let's go all in this year. It's like, no, is it the right year or is it not? Make an honest to God, clear assessment of the situation. Don't just start jumping one foot to the next. Peter Go Hawks, thank you for the $2 donation. Peter, appreciate you. Hope you're having happy holidays. It says, what's it take to get Jalen Carter and Myles Murphy? Oof.
Okay, you would need the Broncos to do what they're going to do and get Jalen Carter. That's very possible. And then you would need Seattle to lose out, and then I think you would need Tyree Wilson to vault above Myles Murphy on big boards. So the next team that needs a defensive lineman like that takes Wilson instead of Murphy, and then Murphy might slip down to, we might pick at 9 if we lose out. That's possible.
Mm-hmm. I think that would probably be about the only pathway with it, Peter, for us to get to Myles Murphy, is the main point of Brendan's point, with that being that you'd have to kind of lose out, I think, to get there. Because if we're talking about being at 17, 18, 19, and then having to move back to 9 or 8, that's going to then cost you a future first round pick to get that done, or the 2 second round picks to go up and then make that selection of Murphy at that spot. And that's a tantalizing defensive line then you're being able to potentially put together with those two guys. But it doesn't really go in line with Schneider's previous history. He's never traded up in a first round in his life. He has traded up in other rounds, but never a first round. And I think there's a reason for that. And it's even in those years where he was lamenting about the fact they never got to pick top 15, he didn't do it. It was driving him crazy. I know it was. So if he's not going to do it then, I don't think he's going to do it now. I think he's sitting there looking at all these picks and he's just like, look at all these wonderful picks. He's like Scrooge McDuck diving beneath his golden draft picks and coming back up in his vault. That's what it reminds me of. I just picture Schneider doing that, in his own head, so to speak. So I'd love to have a man, Peter. They're great players. And I think I'm very, very high on Myles Murphy. I don't think he's all that far away from Carter, though I think Carter's better. He's going to be a really good pro, I think, at the next level. Have you looked at any Myles Murphy?
Oh yeah. He's somebody who's definitely on my radar.
He's a fun player. He's definitely got some juice. It's got some juice. Well, we broke kind of down this matchup here, Brendan, and I think we got a pretty good sober read on this thing, despite the fact we have some high hopes that maybe we can pull this through. How do you see this game playing out? -5 degrees out in Arrowhead, second loudest stadium in all of football. Where do you see this one going?
I'll go Chiefs 31, Seahawks 21. I think we make it a game, but not that much of a game.
It's pretty good. That's a pretty good score. I don't think that I can pull back off that score pretty far. So let's go 30. I'll give them a couple more points. We'll go 34, and then we manage. I think 21's about right. 3 touchdowns. You find a way to 3 touchdowns. So 34-21. I think our Hawks are just not quite able to pull it off. There's these other Chiefs in other years, and you had a couple of other weaknesses that they were there to exploit. But unfortunately, they're not at strengths. Like their run stuffing is not necessarily strength. Their ability to run the ball is not a strength. but it's not quite the weakness it's been in prior years, Brendon. And that's the part that stands out to me in this game is you just don't have something clear that you can go at and say, that's it. That's what we'll get him at. That's how we can do it. And a couple bounces of the ball, a couple turnovers in our right direction. But this Chiefs team definitely has an honest to God reason for why they are considered kind of one of the Super Bowl front runner teams this year. They've earned that, along with, I think, the Bills are in that line, and Niners seem to be given a little bit of that. And the Eagles, if they have Hurts healthy, are kind of in that same role a little bit. And how people view those teams as sort of being a little bit of the special crop. And then you get the same feeling. Would you say those are kind of your top four?
Yeah, that sounds about right to me.
Probably fair. Yeah.
That sounds right.
They've distinguished themselves. James Richards with James Richard, the third donation of the night. Thank you, my brother. I really appreciate you. You're a scholar and a gentleman and a kind sir. Says, I believe with a running game, beast mode, Russell Wilson is unstoppable. Versus the Chiefs in the latest game, we kind of seen that. A solid run game is arguable for any quarterback. Yet for Russ, we know it's the case. Run, run, run. I've got a theory on this one. I want to hear yours, though, with this.
Well, first of all, in that Chiefs game, the Broncos were down 27-0, so I don't know how that equates to unstoppable. They scored a bunch of points against a team that had clearly let off the gas. So I think that people are trying to ascribe a bunch of meaning to a game that, by the way, Denver lost anyway. So I'm definitely not on board with that. And I will say at the end of the year, last year, when our running game really got going with Penny, when Penny went off on that insane run where he had like 1,000 yards across 6 games or something, Wilson still didn't play that well. He completely gave away that Bears game. He was terrible against the Rams. There were some good things, but to say that it's that simple, that's definitely not true.
I do think he still's got some other stuff beyond the run to clean up with that, James. And thank you for the donation. I really do appreciate it. I think you do have a little bit of a point here with James, where honestly, if I was in charge of the Denver Broncos right now as a general manager, after I'd poured myself 2 doubles and drank those down, I would then come to the conclusion of this. Russell Wilson's not going to fix the neck up stuff at this point in time in his game. He's 33, 34 years old here soon. If he was going to take on that ownership role like Geno Smith did in that 10 years of darkness where he did that lonely work and refined his game in that way, he would have done it. He's not done it. It's not going to happen. So the Russell Wilson you basically have is the Russell Wilson you're going to get. And with that, if that is the case, then I do agree back to you on this, James, of the way I would design it is rather than going look for the West Coast offense or some spread-based formational offense that's going to see him having a high volume of passes. Instead of that, I do look for more of a power-based running kind of situation where he might only end up having 24 to 28, 29 attempts a game. But what you're going to do is you're going to gash teams in the running game. You've got the offensive line already right now. That's probably more of a run blocking offensive line than it's a pass blocking offensive line. And then you are able to get one of those safeties in this split high safety situation. Look, there's this Vic Fangio situation where we've got going on right now with these 2 high safeties. You bring one of those safeties down into the box, James, and then you're left with the single high. And then that's when Russell's going to have opportunities to go back to completing the deep stuff again. It opens back up the moon ball stuff. That's where you can get back to him getting some success at that point. But it will never be at a point where it's going to be on the back of a high volume approach or kind of, in my opinion, Brendon, him ever really running a modernized, true blue 2023 NFL offense purified.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot when you consider the money that he's making. It's like, I gave you all this money and now I have to do all this too. But it's probably what you got to do. You're right.
Yeah, and it's not ideal, James, in the respect of it makes me feel good doing it this way. But if you're looking for reclamation, if you're looking to still derive value up out of Russ or some kind of pathway that gets you there, I go to Russ and go, look, you've been paid. You got your contract. You're not going to perform to it. We're going to tell you this is how the offense is going to run now. Here's what you're going to do. And you're going to force him to do it. I'd force him into more of the situation than from there too, of obviously the play action. Russ doesn't want to turn his back to the line. He wants to do more of the shotgun-based stuff, but that's kind of still to his detriment. He needs to do more of the under center stuff with the turning his back. It helps out his mobility. And I'd build that stuff into that offense too. It wouldn't have to be wild. It wouldn't have to be all these moving parts in all these different directions. It could be a pretty simplified approach, old school football approach. But that's what killed Russell Wilson in 2020. And correct me if I'm wrong here, Brendon. What killed you was the fact that he was having all this dynamic production early in 2020, and then teams slid into that 2 safety high look. And that was no counter. And they went post snap to cover 2. They showed you the 2 high safety look, and then they went more often than not to cover 2. So he always had bracket coverage on those outside receivers at that point. You just got to find a way to remove that. And then that's maybe a place to find some ultimate maybe success there. Thank you though, James. You are awesome, brother. I appreciate you, and good luck out there, man. We hope you guys get that, somewhat turned around. We want our picks good this year, but nobody I think is looking for us to super fail long-term in that respect of things. Mark Sanchez with a $5 donation. Thank you, Mark. It says, if we don't make the playoffs, that makes the Hawks eligible for Hard Knocks. Would either of you be excited if the Hawks were chosen?
I mean, I don't think I would watch it. I've never watched Hard Knocks. I don't have that much interest in it. I still don't think I would watch it. And it seems like it's just another distraction that teams don't do well with.
I'm exactly aligned on it, Brendon, with this, Mark. Some people really love it. I think the show's quality, it's gotten more like beautiful in recent years, and the shots they get are wonderful and all that, but the content itself is pretty empty at the end of the day. And a big part of that is the coaching staff doesn't let you get into the juicy stuff you'd really like to see if you got to see behind the curtain. Instead, it's all this sort of milquetoast stuff that's just what they want to present you on. And so it's not as, to me, exciting as it would be if it was just the old school little bit of Hard Knocks where you're getting kind of a really true peek back behind the curtain. Teams are a little more buttoned up and they're a little bit more selective with that type of stuff. So I think it could only end up being a detriment, especially for a team next year that we're going to be looking to, not only get in the playoffs, we're going to be hoping that team can make some actual noise next year and be capable of doing so with all that they've been able to re-inject into the roster and the money that they're going to have to spend and all that type of stuff.
Yeah, I'm just pass. I'll put it that way.
I'm a pass too on that. I'm a big pass too as well. So yeah. I just
think about it this way. Would Bill Belichick ever let his team on Hard Knocks? You already know the answer. No. And you probably want to follow his lead.
He'd bring out that hell to the no meme. That's what Bill actually do. That's his response to the commissioner's office. How about no? Here's my rings. Thank you for the triple donation there, Mark, on your part. I appreciate you, man. I hope you're doing well tonight. Happy holidays. Taker610 with a $2 donation says, after tonight's debacle, I bet Zach is done in New York.
Robert Saleh is saying you haven't seen the last of him. So,
yeah, the tough part for the Jets is he doesn't cost them a tremendous amount of money, because if they move him, they're going to have to swallow up bonus money that's going to offset whatever they get for moving him. So you have to almost just be at a point of he's a sunk cost, and we just got to get him out of here. There's no hope for him to bring in. Which if you're already dropping that coin, it's very easy to talk yourself into. Give him a year more. Maybe he has the humble pie. Maybe he comes back to this and he really starts to really figure out what it's going to take to be a pro and to be a good quarterback, great quarterback, whatever. So I think he ends up probably still lasting there another year, but they're not going to hitch their horses to him and say, this is the guy to run this franchise moving forward. He would be, I'm sure, viewed as probably a backup guy there, absent them being able to get some team out there that loved him a couple years ago and still loves him and thinks New York has done him dirty. And, they could talk him into it, I guess, on that.
Yeah. What happened to Flacco? Why isn't he playing?
I'm not sure. I think they like Mike White. Mike White's had a couple of moments.
Yeah, I understand.
Executed their offense.
No. I get the Mike White thing, but after Mike White gets hurt, they're putting Zach Wilson out there. They're putting Streveler out there. Flacco was playing okay.
I agree. I would think that he would be a better option, especially Brendon. To your point on this is a team that's trying to make the playoffs right now. They're in the playoff hunt. Why wouldn't you want to play? You're not at a point right now of like, well, we're invested in this quarterback that we took a couple of years ago, and you should be at a spot if you're the Jets of going, to hell with whatever we've invested in this guy. If he's not looking good in the practice field and he's not looking good on the field, and if you've got a point, for instance, Brendon, this year where you had all of the Jets players getting onto an airplane at one point wearing Mike White shirts, that probably tells you the locker room's lost your dynamic young starting quarterback that you took a couple of years ago. I mean, they're screaming at you that you need to make that kind of decision and choice at that point. So,
right.
Odd to go back, but they're trying not to have to eat a lot of crow on that pick. General managers don't like to have that type of stuff on their resume and having I was the guy that drafted Zach Wilson, or I was the guy that drafted Mitchell Trubisky. It's that tends to leave a stain, right? Like that tattoo doesn't rub off. Mm-hmm. But I don't think he gets another chance, Taker. I agree with you. I don't.
I suspect he's done in New York at least. I would agree.
Yeah, and we'll see where he goes. He had some great college tape, I guess, from some folks. But I didn't get. Did you get it with him coming out? Were you in?
No, I was a big fan. I loved his arm. Okay. I loved him. I thought that arm. I was like, this is like the small version of Josh Allen But no, I mean, he still has a great arm, but he doesn't have anything else.
Yeah, the decision making is just completely broken. It's amazing to see. It's just like, dude, it's just not. There's no processing going on there. So I say it's arm and then processing for me. Arm and then what you got upstairs as far as how you go through your deal. James Richard, another $2 donation. Thank you, James. Like 4 donos, man. You're awesome. Says first time watching, you guys are better than you think. First time watching. You guys are better than you think. Oh, wow.
I mean, I think I'm pretty good, so
Well,
I don't know about that.
he called on me. I'm not sure about myself, but you're very kind, James. That's very kind of you to say. We love what we do on this. Me and Brendan have been doing this together now, I think, well over a year, and it's just we love getting into the depth of this stuff. Really trying to get into the intricacies and understand it as much as anything else. And some people think don't be critical, but just we're trying to go all the way around, man. Look at the 360 degrees. And we don't always get there, but we try to get there. I think that's what we're trying to aspire to touch. But you're very kind for saying that, man. I appreciate it. Chase Stern with the $2 donation says, do you think the 49ers are done with Trey Lance? It's fun. Boy, that fan base is in on Purdy, man. They are all in on the Brock Purdy experience.
I don't think there's any reason for them to be done with Trey Lance. Maybe Shanahan is.
Yeah.
Maybe Shanahan is. But I still look at Trey Lance and I go, how can you rule on him yet? He's barely played football.
Yeah, I don't think that they are done with him, Chase. I don't know what Shanahan's opinion is on him. I think that they've been given a golden gift from God with the Purdy situation because they were going to be facing a very realistic possibility of having to essentially pay Garoppolo another 20-25 million this offseason simply because they were unsure of what they had in Lance. Now they've got a backup plan with Purdy, so they don't have to make that signing of Garoppolo, which gives them a lot of flexibility because they now get to remain cheap at the quarterback position, especially when they're paying like 6-7 guys top of the position money. Trent Williams, Deebo Samuel, Fred Warner, Jimmy Ward, right? So you've got to have some area cleared up on the quarterback front to get that done. Lance got injured this year when they ran a power run up the middle for the second straight time in a game where he had been on the field for 2 drives. It was ridiculous at that time. It's ridiculous right now. I don't know why we're in the modern NFL. We're having to tell offensive coaches that you shouldn't be running power with your quarterback up the middle. That's stupid. That's dumb. Sometimes these coaches do stuff that's just defies belief to me. I don't care if there's yards to be had. The downside versus what you're getting on the pro side of running a power run with your quarterback up the middle is not worth it. That squeeze is not worth that juice at all. So, Trey Lance hasn't played like horrifically when he's been in there. The first week of the year where he played, I guess, not great was in Chicago in a monsoon downpour. Then he was against us for a quarter and he was out. So he was going to need 2 years all the time to develop. This is the same thing with me with Brendan, with Anthony Richardson. He's going to require 2 years to develop as well. Give them those 2 years and let's see what those guys are at after those 2 years. Show me where they're at as far as their ability to process and do what you need a quarterback to on the field. Then let's make our assessment of them. I think the Niners will land on the same place. And in my prediction, I think Trey Lance, if he can stay healthy, will win that job. His arm is so much more significantly better than Purdy. He's going to win that job out of camp.
Fair, Brendan? I agree. Well, I still wonder if they bring in like a third person. I still wonder if they bring in somebody because next year is going to be such a big year for them. I still think Lynch gets fired. I think Lynch is done, and Shanahan's probably going to be feeling the heat.
You think he gets fired?
I don't see how they keep him. How can they even consider it? He made one of the worst trades in NFL history, and then he also has the Kinlaw pick. Like he's terrible at his job.
There's a lot of other guys they found though there that have been pretty good players. That have been, and I mean, there's definitely some blemishes on his record, but was he the guy that got the Fred Warner in there and Deebo Samuel and George Kittle? And I mean, you go down the list of all these other guys too. He signed Trent Williams and brought him in and, he's definitely had a lot of other side. And then look again, they're going to be maybe a team going to the Super Bowl and he could, Lynch or Shanahan at that point as an owner, owners coming being like, look, we've been to now, let's say they get to a conference championship this year, which seems even their kind of floor right now. Okay, so we've got to 2 conference championships and a Super Bowl over the last 5 years. I mean, that's hard for me to come as an owner to a coach or a general manager and say, okay, I got to can you because these 2 choices happened and occurred. I get what you're saying. It's a bad trade with the Lance as it stands right now. It is. I'm not trying to discount that.
It's not a bad trade. It's one of the worst trades ever. It's Odin over Durant. And by the way, the guy who made that pick got fired a couple years later, even though he was really good.
Mm-hmm. No, it's
So,
true. It can be, sometimes it can come down to sometimes a bad decision. Like we were just talking about this with Wilson, right? Like I was just speaking about Wilson, how that could be the tattoo that doesn't rub off. It's very much the same thing.
mhm.
That one bad decision can be the thing that just it's hounding you, on it. I do think you do get that the benefit of the doubt if you're winning. I don't know if those Portland teams, for instance, with those trades were winning after that. And so the guy still got fired in there winning and he had done the Odin trade. It usually is, okay,
Yeah.
you missed on the guy and now you're going to suck for years, years to come. And that might be just enough to keep him in that spot. But
And like George Patton's done a lot of good things too, but everyone keeps saying he's going to get fired this offseason because the Wilson trade is so bad. I don't see how Lynch is any different.
yeah, well, I mean, with George Patton, though, there's a variety of different things that you could look at with him where you go, that was beyond that trade. You look at some of the secondary stuff, like you go out in free agency and you grab Randy Gregory and then you sign the defensive tackle DJ Jones. So you already had a great strength on your defense. Rather than getting an offensive line to help Wilson out, you went defensive lines. You make this investment of Wilson, but you don't invest in Wilson, so to speak, at that point. Look then to the draft. Their third pick of the draft goes to Nick Bonito. So you finally get to, pick, and you're going with like an edge player. I know they brought a tight end in there, but that was supposed to already be for a position they had somebody kind of set at. And so I mean, there's some stuff in George Patton's that I could maybe pick with too, on saying, yeah, that one's a historically bad when he gets picked, but there's some secondary ones. And again, they're not winning right now. They're going to be a horrible record. They're giving us that pick. As bad as that Niner trade is and giving up the Trey Lance pick, where are those first round picks going to line at? The 20s? Is that going to be, what was it the previous year? It was like 24, 25, right? This year it'll be around 25, 26. Like
Yeah.
what players are they really getting those of that team that trade up at that point for how far that's one of the reasons I don't like Brendon, for instance, with our first round pick, going back in that teens 20 range when you make that 3 first round selection point, because you could end up in a situation where you never end up picking in that high point. It's like the Bears offer for Wilson a couple years ago. They're offering us 3 first round picks, but that first round pick was going to be the 20th overall selection in the first round, which isn't that juicy. You're into tier 2 by that point in that draft, It's interesting discussion.
I don't know. And I mean, I think people also kind of forget about the Kinlaw thing now too, like how bad that is. Because
True.
they had the best interior defensive lineman in the league, traded him for the Kinlaw pick, and Kinlaw literally has done nothing in his career and will probably never do anything. He's one of the bigger busts in recent memory. I don't know if Lynch can outrun all that.
It's true. When the Kinlaw's a bad one, DeForest Buckner has still been lighting the world on fire there with the Colts. He's been exactly what they hoped they were getting when they did that, make that, move for him there. So I wouldn't discount that. I'm with you there in the respect of that one's definitely gonna be a black mark. I just think the winning will help him. That'll be just enough to maybe offset him and carry him through, but it certainly is going to make the seat hot, at least for him in that respect. Thank you though, Chase. I appreciate you, man. Peter Go Hawks, another $2 donation. Thank you, Peter. Says thoughts on Anthony Richardson, possibly our 4th pick. That'd be the second round pick.
I mean, yeah, if you could get him down there, I'd probably be all over that.
If he lasts that point, Peter, that would be sensational value. Alas, I agree with Brendon on this one with his tone to the answer there. I got the feeling he feels probably the same way I do, which is that he's not going to lapse to the depths of the second round pick. Your real best case scenario is maybe that first second round pick, maybe, but even the odds on that are probably going to be long.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that he probably should, because he was bad in college, but that talent is going to make somebody fall in love with him. And I get it. Ultimately, you're not drafting a player because of what he's done. You're drafting him because of what you think he can do. But yeah, if he fell to us in the second round, I'm all over that. Absolutely. 100%.
I would be as well. I'm all over it right there at that spot. The first round's a little bit hard for me to pull the trigger on there with it, Peter, because of the reasons Brendon just said. I'm taking this guy, and I know I got to wait to 2 years. Like I said this with Trey Lance when he was taken. I love Trey Lance, but it was going to take him 2 years to get to where he needed to get to. He had hardly played any college football, and he was tremendously young. The very same thing is applied with Anthony Richardson. So when you draft him, you're waiting 2 years to get the fruits. And when you get the fruits, you have the guy with the highest upside of any quarterback in this draft. That's the fruits of what he could deliver for you. But to give a first round pickup for a guy I got to wait 2 years, that's the hard part that is to swallow, as we see these Niner fans struggling with it with the Lance situation, where they're becoming really impatient. Why isn't he good out the gates? Like, you got to give him that 2 years. It's hard for fans to have that kind of patience with the player. Like, you got to build it for this kind of guy. He is not Lamar Jackson coming out. He's not a guy who had 2 great years of college production, won a Heisman Trophy, It's not the same kind of thing which some people are going to try to apply to there with that kid. So you're doing a little bit more of the squinting and trying to look far off into the horizon as to where he will be eventually versus what he is right now.
Right.
Like him.
I just can't do it in the first.
Can't do it in the first, man. There's too many other good players out there that we're passing by at that point that we don't have to wait on their production, who will step on the field instantaneously and go. But if he can slide, and I've heard some varying opinion on this with him, and that, NFL scouts I hear some is going to be the second round. I hear some will know he'll get in the first round. I hear even some talk where he'll vault up even to top 10 because some team will just fall in love with him. So he is very hard to engage exactly where he's going to be, but I don't think he gets past the first probably 10 picks in the second round.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Minimum. Thank you, Peter. Appreciate you, though. And thank you to everybody there for donating. Oh, we got James Richard, another one here. Sorry, one sec. As I get down to it. Chat's lively tonight. It's good to see. James with another $2 donation. Thank you, James. It says Super Bowl, Chiefs versus 49ers. My prediction, yours.
I'm going to say Chiefs versus, let me think here for a second. God, everyone in the NFC except the Eagles seems super fraudulent. I'm trying to think here. Mm-hmm. I'm not picking the Niners because of Purdy. There's just no way, no how. That's not happening. I guess, God, Jalen Hurts got hurt now too, though. I don't know.
I know. That's the problem with making the Eagles, because even if Hurts comes back, you go, yeah, but is he at a really 100% of his arm, or is he just kind of like, he's like, every time he throws, he's going, ooh, oh, one of those things where he's just toughing it out. And some guys will do that. And that you don't know how he's going to look at that point.
Oh, God, I definitely would have taken the Eagles if not for that. Given that, though, wow. God, is it the Niners? Is it really Brock Purdy?
Yeah.
Maybe I'll go. Oh, man, I don't know what to do about the NFC. I got no idea whatsoever.
James, I'm on the same place where you're at with it, honestly, as I look at it. I do think it's the Chiefs and the Niners at this point. I think the Chiefs will do enough to get the number 1 seed, and that'll give them enough rest to get them prepared. I think that they'll have another fun matchup with the Bills that they'll carry through. Brennan just walked through why the NFC is so tough here, because as much as you don't want to go with the Niners with Purdy, with his arm, you do look at it and you go, well, Vikings have the worst defense in football. Hard to see that getting to a Super Bowl. The Dallas Cowboys, you don't know who's showing up week to week with them, and their quarterback seems to be regressing at a fairly high rate. I don't see any of the people that would be going in the playoffs from a potential Seattle to a Giants or any of that kind of or Washington football team making a considerable amount of noise from that angle of it. You kind of come down to the Niners, man. You do, even with Purdy's limitation, because I think Jalen Hurts is going to be probably injured in that throwing ability as we go into and I was already worried about him, and he could be very much almost somewhat of an equivalency on how he throws to what Purdy is if they meet up in the playoffs with that arm, if it is hurt and if he's still dinged up a little bit. I've never quite trusted the Eagles this year, as stacked as they've been, and the Niners are battle tested. They've gone through the playoffs. They've been there. They've done that. They've gone to Green Bay. They've played in some tough environments. I'm going to go it's Chiefs 49ers. And then I think it's the Chiefs who win it, because I don't think Brock Purdy at that point is going to be good enough to carry him to a Super Bowl.
Yeah, I guess that sounds about right. God, the NFC's terrible. We can't take advantage.
I know.
How sad is that?
This year was in our look. You don't get years set up, Brendan, like we've had this year set up. With you look at the strength of schedule, and then you look at the strength of schedule we've had in combination with our division kind of falling apart this year, and then in combination with those teams that you got to play that were weakened foes, who were down this guy and that guy and this guy and this guy and that guy, and meanwhile you were down that guy and that guy. And that's a lot of the matchups you've had this year. Was everything's there for you to go out there and take this year, because it is wide open. It's not maybe going to be like this ever into the future once again, like it's kind of been this year. We might look at this and say that was a real one-off kind of year for the NFC and the NFC West too.
Absolutely. I mean, our division actually, when this season ends, probably are going to look at it and go, this division ended up being pretty awful.
I think you're right. I certainly think the Cardinals and Rams we look at as bad teams in the NFL this year, and we'll see where our final assessment is of us when it all boils down. But, I agree that would be the case, and the Niners might get the Super Bowl, but it ain't going to be indicative of the fact that it was because this division was so rock solid. In fact, they'd probably have a good chance of getting there because that feast factor thing I talk about sometimes, where they got the feast factor on NFC West, which helped get them to the point they can get to the playoffs relatively fresh enough to handle business at that point. It'll
Yeah.
be interesting to see, though. It'll be that'd be an interesting matchup with the Chiefs and the Niners. But yeah, I think the Chiefs will be able to hang in there on that. They got the ability to hold up and pass pro.
You know what? What am I saying? Gardner Minshew is going to win the Super Bowl.
Oh, wouldn't that be amazing?
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't that be amazing? I saw a hype video on him on Twitter because he's going to be starting this week for the Eagles. So,
Yeah.
hey, that kid can play. Anytime he's been put in there to throw the rock, he's handled business out there. So, who am I to short sell that guy and say he can't get it done?
Mm-hmm.
He's got a lot to work with, man. He's got great
He does.
lines. He's got Brown. He's got guys on the outside to throw to, tight end. I could see it. Oh, sorry, picked the wrong one. D Nugget, thank you for the $2 donation. Says, yeah, Merry Christmas, boys. Thank you, D Nugget. Merry Christmas to everyone out there. I hope everybody has a happy holiday, stays nice and warm, and gets all of the gifts that they were hoping they were going to get this Christmas. So,
yeah,
thank you, man. Appreciate you.
Mm-hmm.
MJ Seahawk with a $5 donation. Thank you, MJ Seahawk. It says, if we get Carter with the first pick, how open are you to trading out of the first round next year and stack up some middle round picks?
Depends on who's available. But offhand, I would say probably not.
Yeah, I would say stack up some middle round. So we're giving up a future first for like 2 seconds at that point. Would be probably what you're getting is you're getting 2 twos in this draft. I don't think you're going to give up a future first for a second and a third in this draft. Even high, that seems like maybe a second, third, fourth for a future first. I don't think I would want to do that either, though, because number one, I don't know if the value's there and who's going to be there is a big part to Brendan's point on this MJ Seahawk. Who is the guys we're looking at that we want to snag there? Is it just to simply trade up there? Or is there a guy how did he fall? We've got to jump on this guy type of situation. But the secondary part is that we still don't know where this team is going to be at next year. As much as you add talent, I really hold the line on this. Yeah, you could add talent this next year. Those guys could perform really well out the gate, but we could still find this defense being exposed right and left all over the place. And that ends up holding you down from a standpoint of you providing another team a really good first round pick. There are 3 teams picking in the top 10 of this draft because there were 3 other teams that took a risk in last year's draft to believe that they weren't going to have these picks be in the top 10. So as I see that as a general way of how this has played out recently for some other teams, I probably would want to avoid being the one to put my foot in the bucket. I'd be putting the bucket under the foot of somebody else. That's why I want to trade back a little bit with that first round pick, Brendan. Just it's so much more beneficial to the team moving.
Offhand, I'm not a big fan.
Yeah, can't quite get there on that one. I see where you're going with it, but just can't quite sign up for it on that one. Well, I think that might be a good spot here for us to wrap up as we do push an hour 41 on in here to Brendan. Thank you guys to all the donations though in the chat. You guys are as ever very, 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 very kind. What we don't listen to is there anything you want to get into? Just kind of wrap up. We didn't talk a little bit about the Davian Nixon deal. We did that to make some roster moves. Do you want to get a little just quick touch on those, Brendan?
I mean, I already kind of said the only thing I have to say about it. I'm surprised how small he is, given that we've lost Woods and Monet.
Yeah, I wonder if they're just thinking who knows, maybe we see the 4-3 defense or something, but maybe it's it just there wasn't a big body out there to go out there and get. And you do get this deep into the year, man, that those guys have been plucked off the street if they were there to be plucked in the first place. Still somewhat NFL-like bodies that could hold up. But it's going to be an interesting game this week, man. It's going to be cold. We're going up against maybe the best team in the NFL, maybe one of the team that goes out there and wins the Super Bowl this year. So it's going to be as tough a task as our Seahawks have had this year, Brendan, in a year where the tasks haven't been exactly that tough across the board, absent a couple of games up against maybe like the Niners and whatnot. So it's stiff test, but I think you and I both agree we're going to at least give them a little bit of a battle on this. They may end up running away with it, but I don't think we just lay over and fall over on this one. It just becomes, look, they're a little more talented. We're on the road, 10 all those little factors that build up to it. But it'll be fun to watch. It'll be good just for the old AFC West days for my own heart on that. I go back, I'm an old head in that respect. So it revives some of that old rivalry for me, Brendan. It's been kind of fun going through the AFC West in that respect this year.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, folks, do me a favor, a couple quick favors. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please do get subscribed to the channel here as we do content every week. Me and Brendan do 2 shows a week on each side of our channels here. Also hit that like button if you could. Also does help us out. But then also the third thing and most important thing here is go over there, Seahawks Brendon Nelson, Seahawks Brendon Nelson, his channel over here on YouTube, and get subscribed over to him as well. Like I said, we oscillate between each other's channels and how we do these shows. So you want to be subscribed to him so you can keep catching our content on that side of it. We got the Saturday game, and then I believe we are back onto, is my end or your end next on Tuesday?
It'll be on your channel, the post game.
Beautiful. So we'll be back over here
And,
on.
yeah.
So I'll be live streaming the game. I'll be on Sunday, and then we'll be back here on Tuesday as well onto my side here with Brendon. But do please get subbed up over to his side of the channel. I really do appreciate it. I hope all of you are having a happy Merry Christmas. It's a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Let me say it right. Gosh dang it. But I hope you guys are all having a great Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, all that stuff, and are taking really good care of yourselves out there. Brendon, you're awesome for coming out here as always, man. I really do appreciate it. And, there's some that think this season's over with, man. There's some here, Brendon and I keep hearing, okay, we got to look to the next year. And we're kind of looking into next year, but this ain't over yet, is it? This ain't over quite yet. We ain't dead quite yet. Let them bury us, but we ain't there yet. We're going to be like Carrie. We're going to stick our hand up out of that ground right at the end when they think we're dead and gone, so to speak. So, Brendon, let's remind them. Let's remind them that we're Seahawks fans, and if there's still fight left to give, if we're still mathematically within this, if we're still a possibility, even as small a possibility as may be, then we're fighting. We're here, and we're going to remind you. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.